Welcome to Civilization Jihad Awareness, the show where truth wins every time. This word, this terminology, Civilization Jihad, is not something I made up. It is something created by the Muslim Brotherhood to define their war against the United States and Canada. And that's pretty much what they thought North America was. They probably didn't know Mexico is included with in North America. But what is this? Where does this term come from? It comes from a document called the Explanatory Memorandum, and this document was discovered in a hidden sub-basement of Ismail Abrace's house. This is one of the past leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood in North America, and this document was used in the Holy Land Foundation trial, the largest terrorism financing trial ever in the United States. And I'm just going to read you one paragraph from that. It says this: the process of settlement is a civilization jihadist process with all that the word means. The Ikhwan must understand that their work in America is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying the Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their hands in the hands of the believers, so that it is eliminated and God's religion is made victorious over all other religions. Without this level of understanding, we are not up to this challenge and have not prepared ourselves for jihad yet. It is a Muslim's destiny to perform jihad and work wherever he is and wherever he lands until the final hour comes. And there is no escape from that destiny except for those who choose to slack. But would the slackers and the mujahideen be equal? Now, this is the kind of war that has been engaged against the United States for over 50 years. And I say over 50 years because we're going back all the way to the 60s for their first organization, the Muslim Student Association. Now, we have in the studio today Andrew Harrod, and Andrew Harrod has one incredible article that he wrote. And I want to tell you, let me give you a little background as to who Andrew Harrod is. He's been on the show before, and if he keeps writing this incredible amount of great articles, we're going to have to keep having him back. Oh my gosh, this work is just phenomenal. So who is Andrew? Andrew Harrod's a freelance researcher and writer who holds a PhD from Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, and a JD, that's basically 2 doctorates, from George Washington University of Law School. He is admitted to the Virginia State Bar. He has published over 400 articles concerning various political and religious topics at the American Thinker, The Blaze, Breitbart, Capital Research Center, Daily Caller, Front Page Magazine, Institute on Religion and Democracy, Independent Journal, Review, Investigative Project on Terrorism. Now that's a pretty big one if you get in there. Oh, wow. And Philos Project, Research Freedom Coalition, Washington Times, and World. And he is a fellow with the Lawfare Project, an organization combating the misuse of human rights laws against Western societies. Now, he can be found on Twitter at AEHARROD. Now, I'm going to just unmute Mr. Harrod and say, welcome, Mr. Harrod. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's great to be here again. Thank you for having me, Paul.
Oh, my gosh. The work you did on this particular article, I think you must have like a wealth of knowledge, I know, on this topic. I know that I called you for help because your article sang to me personally. It's one of the reasons I wanted to share. I'm working on a postgraduate paper where I'm having to look at Islamist charities in the United States, but we'll get to that later. So I want to get everybody to understand. I have Mr. Harrod here because his article in the American Spectator is not making some people happy. UK government must be up in arms because what Mr. Harrod wrote actually challenges their misinformation, which is paid for exclusively basically by the European Union. So, Mr. Harrod, please tell us about this meeting that took place, this supposed report by the British, British Council? British Council that you exposed so well.
Well, the report is from the British Council, published in its name. The British Council is a British organization. It's a British government sort of public affairs, public relations body that around the world acts. You might compare it to maybe say the American U.S. Information Agency or so forth. It presents information and views involving Britain and engages in public relations work and presents informs people around the world about events going on in Britain. And they had a recent report on the Muslim humanitarian sector in the United Kingdom, and as you indicated, it was funded in part by both the British government and the European Union. It's presented recently at the British Embassy here in Washington, D.C. on February 21st. I was not able to actually go to the presentation event because of limited spacing they had for it. They must have filled up this event fairly quickly, although I've been to other similar events at the British Embassy here in Washington, D.C. before, near the Naval Observatory where the Vice President lives, right off of Massachusetts Avenue. But the report analyzes they refer to as the Muslim humanitarian sector. And yet as you read through the report and you look at all the names of the organizations that are profiled, and if you have any knowledge of these organizations, if you investigate these organizations, all of them have all sorts of extremist and indeed terrorism ties. So you just wonder how any Western government, a government of a democracy, could use public taxpayer funds to put out a report like this, basically presenting all these organizations just as very as Muslim charitable organizations, or just the Muslim equivalent of the Salvation Army or Habitat for Humanity. It's really astonishing that such a whitewash would take place.
And one of the first charity you mentioned is a Saudi NGO, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this, Haramain Foundation. Is that correct?
Haramain Foundation, yes. Yes, indeed.
So back when I first started researching the Muslim Brotherhood 6 or 7 years ago, I saw this organization I saw this organization and who it was linked to, who was promoting it, and it was the Muslim Brotherhood. And there are links from this organization to multiple terrorist organizations. Mr. Harrod, please tell us why this is not the kosher deal that the British Council likes everybody to believe.
Well, the United States government itself, the Al Haramain Foundation, is based in Saudi Arabia, and it has all sorts of branches worldwide. And throughout the years following the September 11th, 2001 Al-Qaeda attacks, the United States government actually designated successive chapters of the Al Haramain Foundation around the world, in, say, Bosnia and other places. I think some 13 in total over the years were designated as being terrorism funding organizations linked to Al-Qaeda. And then ultimately I believe it was in 2006, the United States Department of the Treasury just simply designated the entire organization around the world as a terrorism support organization. The United Nations as well has had a similar designation, all for Al Haramain's support of Al-Qaeda in particular and other terrorist groups. So, it just boggles the mind again that the British Council would list this organization as being just a charitable organization, and the report just simply dismisses that counterterrorism officials have assumed that this humanitarian organization was a front for Al-Qaeda, whereas indeed there's all sorts of evidence showing that it's been deeply involved with Al-Qaeda.
That just blows my mind. The next organization you mentioned was Interpol. Interpol has a few different monikers in it, and it's like the Al Haramain Foundation. And this is still another organization promoted by the Muslim Brotherhood. And this is an organization that, if you research the Muslim Brotherhood, you're going to find a whole bunch of links from the leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood, the old guard of the Muslim Brotherhood, are linked into this. So, what is the charity's real goal, and who are they connected to?
Well, Interpol, a United Kingdom organization, a base organization, is principally involved with Hamas, and its leaders, its directors, Essam Youssef and Ibrahim Hewitt, have visited the Gaza Strip often, where Hamas now has been in power since 2006. This Hamas stand, as it's often called, this sort of Hamas territory, de facto ruled by and they've been honored by Hamas leaders and rallies. They've prayed at tombs of Hamas terrorists. They visited Hamas terrorist homes. They've been Youssef himself was videoed in a sing-along praising martyrs of Hamas's suicide bombing wing, the Qassam brigades, and yet the British Council report merely says that there was a decade-long inquiry in the United Kingdom by their Charities Commission, which ultimately cleared Interpol from being charged with being a funding mechanism for Hamas, although there's extensive reporting on Interpol in the United Kingdom, certainly showing that even if you could somehow not legally charge Interpol or fixing the accusation on of being supporting Hamas terrorism, it certainly had all manner of extremist links and really not an organization anyone interested in charity would want to associate with in terms of the speakers it would host, etc. But again, the report dismisses that the American United States Department of Treasury has listed Interpol as a foreign terrorist supporting organization without any reason. So yeah, it's a complete whitewash.
This is the crazy stuff. It's almost like the inmates are in charge of basically the zoo when they're in this report. This is how it's looking. It's kind of scary, and we'll talk about that, I guess, farther on. But
yeah, I mean, you know what sort of fox is guarding the henhouse here? What inmates have taken over the asylum here? And such a report funded by the British government, the European Union, and presented right at the British embassy is really astonishing, given the groups involved.
Oh, there's even more. This brings us to the big one for me. This is the one that I called and asked you about, because I've been working on a paper to discuss this terrorism financing and supposed window dressing. This supposed window dressing charity. We're talking about the Islamic Relief Charity. Has some real serious issues. In fact, if you read an ISNA magazine today, Horizon, the Islamic Relief USA is advertised on the front inside cover of their latest Horizon magazines. This is plural. So what did the British have to say about Islamic Relief, and why is it wrong?
Well, here the British Council laughingly sort of says that Islamic Relief, yet another supposed charity based in the United Kingdom, has sought to, quote, build an infrastructure of efficiency and transparency, unquote, concerning regulatory oversight of terrorism, anti-terrorism legislation. But Islamic Relief, the various it's been banned in the United Arab Emirates and in Israel as a terrorism financing organization. And banks such as UBS and HSBC have closed down Islamic Relief accounts for terrorism financing fears. They also have a wide range of extremist speakers that they've hosted at Islamic Relief events. And currently there's been there was an effort in the Congress that failed to cut off American funding for Islamic Relief. And that in part was supported by the Middle East Forum, for which I wrote this article. I'm a Campus Watch fellow at the Middle East Forum, and I wrote this article for their other Islamist Watch project. And they took on a lead role in trying to shut down any American links to Islamic Relief USA, the American branch, but were unsuccessful in that. So again, another organization that really should not. I mean, even if you could somehow, even if it had no link specifically to terrorism, you certainly would not want to associate, given its extremist leaders who advocate all sorts of Sharia agendas.
And who they're giving their money to is basically organizations that work directly with Hamas, that Hamas could control who gets access to their to whatever money, whatever the charity goes to, and that's a whole other thing. That's another another bundle of worms to think about. How many? I mean, where these money go to in a Hamas-controlled areas. This is the thing to think about. If you're sending monies to a Hamas-controlled area, are you in some way supporting terrorism? And in many ways, if the government has any access, which is run by Hamas, has any control over who receives the funds. And that's what we're talking about too here, is if the government has control or has any influence in how these funds are spent or who they are used with, that is terrorism financing. Let's see.
Well, anything with Hamas, anything with the Gaza Strip, I think would raise concern because Hamas really does have effectively a kind of totalitarian control over the territory. So anything you send into the Gaza Strip can indeed be misused, and that's a concern. I mean, not just for the organizations we're talking about here, like Islamic Relief, but I mean, of course, the United Nations UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees, has always had lots of problems with Hamas infiltration, and of course, famously or infamously, their facilities like schools and so forth have been used to store Hamas munitions, rockets, and so forth. You had the Worker for World Vision in the Gaza Strip that turned out to be a Hamas operative and had diverted many World Vision funds, this Christian aid organization that operates worldwide, to Hamas and was arrested by the Israelis. So, yeah, if you ever send anything into the Gaza Strip, you've got to ask a lot of questions and be very cautious to see that's not going to be misdirected, because that's just a common occurrence.
In your article, you exposed the presentation of this report was started by the CEO of a charity that claims to fundraise for Hamas. Shouldn't this be a perfect example of terror financing or conflict of interest?
Well, among the people who spoke on the panel at the British Embassy at the British Council were one, Islamic Relief USA's head Anwar Khan, as well as the chief executive officer of another British Islamist charity, Human Appeal International. The FBI and the CIA said that Human Appeal International has served as a fundraiser for Hamas, and Israel has named it as Hamas-affiliated. So all sorts of also leaked State Department cables suggest that Human Appeal International was sending financial support to Hamas-linked organizations, as well as had connections to Al-Qaeda associates. So, precisely having these leaders of these sort of pro-Sharia, pro-Jihad Islamist organizations speaking right at the British Embassy is really quite scandalous. You really are letting the wolves in with their sheep. The wolves dressed as sheep into the fold there.
It's kind of scary to think that. The British government, who's supposed to be our ally, eager to reach their hands across the aisle and basically embrace people who are their sworn enemies. I mean, Hamas is. We've recognized Hamas, so has the United Kingdom recognized them as terrorist organization, but that's basically what they're talking about and doing is embracing them, and it's just insane. One would think, after reading your review of your review of this erroneous report, are terrorists writing this report? Is this an Islamist report to fool stupid dhimmis? That's DHIMMIS, people. It leaves so many questions. Did you find some were involved in making this report who had a conflict of interest?
Well, one of the lead authors of the report is Georgia State University professor Abbas Barzengar. He's a fellow at the Institute for Social Policy Understanding, ISPU, Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, I think it is, but it's ISPU is its acronym, and it's this sort of yet another Islamist organization. It's headed up by, among others, Dalia Mogahed, this John Esposito protege from Georgetown University, who, along with Esposito, once did this book on public opinion surveys of Muslims around the world, and was criticized for basically sort of cooking the books, cooking the data on the survey to sort of massage the numbers and make things look more positive than they were about what Muslim attitudes were on subjects like terrorism and so forth. He's written a lot about, he advocates natural steps of accepting Islamic experience in modern governments, such as the, quote, democratically elected Hamas. You hear all this talk that well, Hamas, after all, in 2005, won these Palestinian Authority elections, so it has a democratic mandate, right? It actually won elections, but of course then they overthrew the Palestinian Authority government in the Gaza Strip and in sort of a coup, and of course there's not been a shred of democracy ever since then, and really any such organization like the Muslim Brotherhood that comes to power in any sort of elections, of course, they don't have any respect for freedom of opinion or religion or so forth. It's the old phrase of one man, one vote, one time. You know, you simply use the election to get whatever power you can, and you install yourself, and then you can put in your dictatorial policies supporting Sharia and instituting Islam as a state religion. You know, he also other articles he's written. He talked about like the Innocence of Muslims film back in 2012 that was claimed to have led all these riots around the world. That was the equivalent of a hate crime, and that therefore we need worldwide. We need to have some laws that would suppress such speech and stop it as a form of hate speech. So it's, you know, pro censorship in the name of Islam. So, you know, I guess you would expect a report from such a person like this with such sympathies. It's not unexpected. So, you know, the question is, you've got to look at who your author is. Whom are you getting to do such reports?
It sounds like they picked the man they wanted, the guy who was able to fudge the numbers and whitewash. I mean, that's his qualifications. He's good at hiding what's actually truthful. I don't see another qualification. I mean, he doesn't necessarily have an accounting degree or something like that. It does. I haven't heard any background for that, but this is just
the background on his bio. I'm trying to remember what you can pull it up in the article. His biography linked under his name. His specific studies at Georgia State University. If I recall, it was something maybe involving Islamic studies or such. I mean, that's sort of been his expertise, maybe in the field of sociology, or I think. But that his specific academic background, you can find linked in the article. But certainly his sympathies are very clear. You know, someone writing these. I mean, any critical person would be very concerned about entrusting such a study to this person and his biases.
Why wouldn't you hire a forensic accountant to do this kind of thing, to prove there's an innocence, or to? I mean, this is the stuff that doesn't make sense to me about this report. It doesn't sound like they did practiced what I would call due diligence, at the very least. Looking at it from like an accountant perspective, I mean, all this information I received, you know, it's available online and in public records, and you know, there's been all this reporting by the BBC and so forth on organizations like Interpol in the United Kingdom. So, you know, you think this would all raise a few eyebrows, but not for our Professor Barzagar at Georgia State University, apparently not. So that's the big thing. All this stuff that you're sharing with us and telling everybody, that to me is the big thing here. So the British Council goes and puts out a report that contradicts what is available to the public. I mean, to anybody, if you just do a little bit of research, it's available. And what would you say to the UK police and to British intelligence that since this kind of report came out from the British Council, what would you say to them about this?
Well, this is, of course, your tax dollars at work if you live in the United Kingdom, or for that matter, in the wider European Union. This is just really a complete lack of oversight that anyone who does, say, term paper's worth of work or something on this to analyze these charities online can find all sorts of references to these groups, and they're not positive. I mean, you know, you would certainly be very skeptical. I mean, I wouldn't want to give a dime to any of these groups, you know. But to pass them off as just sort of a Muslim versions of the Salvation Army or Habitat for Humanity is just simply irresponsible. So I think there needs to be a wider public awareness, and people in the United Kingdom and other free societies around the world should really check up on what their governments are doing vis-a-vis any Islamic groups, to really look before you leap and investigate to see who's who and what's what.
Well, this is another element, because you mentioned the other element. I'm going to be getting into the other half of my show, but you talked about a few seconds ago. We talked about how speech is being oppressed, pretty much in UK. You mentioned a little bit about that, and that's actually what I'm going to be getting into: the free speech oppressed here in the United States in a similar related issue. There's been a lot of stuff, not a news, and if I'll tell people, if you get a chance, you want to go online, go to YouTube, and you want to look up some of the new big pieces on Vlad Tepes has an article, has a video where Tommy Robinson is out there, and he's talking about the oppression of free speech. They're arresting people and charging them with violating free speech for just insulting or offending people. And they're only arresting those that offend Islam. but this is just the insanity of it. You're a wealth of knowledge, Mr. Harrod, and I just want to encourage you to keep sharing this important information. It's so important. I want you, before I let you go, can you tell us which of the charities we discussed today is a prominent issue today here in America, and if there's anything the listeners can do about this?
Well, the one, again, that the Middle East Forum itself has really been following is Islamic Relief and trying to get authorities to cut ties with this American chapter, Islamic Relief USA, of the wider Islamic Relief Organization, which, as with all the other organizations in this report, has all sorts of extremist links. I mean, questions about whether it's supporting terrorism, but beyond that, just plain and simple, the kind of people it associates with, the speakers it hosts, the views it promotes. It's really not something to be supported. I mean, if you want to support charity, give to the Red Cross or give to Habitat for Humanity or the Salvation Army, but don't give to Islamic Relief. I mean, you just not in the United States, not anywhere else. It's just not something you want to associate with. So you can go look up online at the Middle East Forum for their various dossiers they have on Islamic Relief and the public advocacy efforts they've undertaken to separate any public funds, any public authorities from Islamic Relief.
I believe the Investigative Project on Terrorism also has a dossier on Islamic Relief. I read the great work that was done on Middle East Forum. I don't know how much of that is yours. I'd say that's quite detailed, and it is quite. It's not a very extensive one, but it is extremely detailed, and that's the stuff that there is no excuse for a presentation on this material and to ignore simple things like this that are public, that are out there for everybody. And the only way you can ignore it is by purposely doing so. Andrew, why don't you tell everybody how – sorry.
Oh, yes. Well, as the saying goes, if you see something, say something. So keep your eyes open.
So why don't we tell everybody how they can continue to follow your work, and so we can continue to direct people to the great work that you're doing. I know this article I saw on Front Page, and it caught me. I think it was Front Page, right?
This latest article is at the American Spectator.
American Spectator.
Yeah, I've had a few at the American Spectator. I have often written for Front Page, both independently and with the Middle East Forum and other groups. You can find a large body of my work at Family Security Matters, a website which I was just recently told by its editors is now going to discontinue, but they'll keep the site on the archives of it online. They've often reposted much of my stuff. You can find perhaps about 3/4 of my previous work. If you simply Google my name, Andrew Harrod, Harrod, like the department store in London, you will find numerous articles from me. And you can also follow me on Twitter or on Facebook. At Facebook, I'm at A.E. Harrod, Harrod again, on Twitter, and I tweet out my articles, and you can follow me there.
Please keep up the good work. I need that. It helps me with my schoolwork too. So I want to thank you for sharing with me personally as well as on this show. Please don't stop. It's so important what you're doing. I want to say God bless you.
Thank you for having me on again. Love being here.
Yeah, thank you. God bless.
All right, good to talk. God bless.
Oh, this is I have to tell you guys. I came across